Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. It's Friday, June the 5th, 2020 and I forgot to put my wheelie bin out last night. Damn it. Oh well, let's crack on. I get a few people who are regularly asking me for updates on the young lad who got twatted by the South Yorkshire Police Constable William Sampson after the Sheffield Wednesday game some 4 months ago. Although I am constantly trying to chase up old reports for new information, being that I run the channel alone, it can be difficult. However, when I do come across information, I will always share it. In regards to that incident, that was very clear for everyone to see, caught on video, how Sampson rushed in with absolutely no regard to the young lad, belted him around the head with a sickening crack of the baton, making contact with his head before he falls to the ground bleeding. There is some information, although it's not the information that will make you very happy. It was said not long after the incident that Sampson had been placed on restricted duties, meaning that he was likely given a job to do that was not public facing, although there is no evidence that he hasn't been on the beat or dealing with members of the public, only what the force has said in a statement. But let's face it, can they ever really be trusted? Anyway, it appears that Sampson is still working for South Yorkshire Police, albeit they are saying he is still on restricted duties. But he has not been suspended for his actions and is apparently still being investigated by the IOPC 4 months. 4 bloody months after the clear and undeniable video evidence was presented to the world. Now, it is said that he is being investigated over criminal and misconduct charges, but I think this goes to show the huge difference between police investigations and public ones. As in, if it was a member of the public who did this in similar circumstances, that person would absolutely, without shadow of a doubt, have been tried and convicted way before now. But because it's the police, it's taken 4 months. He's still working and is no closer to being sacked or charged. I'm going to say now, regardless to who's watching this and listening to this video, if Sampson isn't dealt with soon, if Sampson doesn't receive the same actions as if it was a member of the public who had been caught doing this, then I will use whatever influence I may have with this channel to make sure that South Yorkshire Police hears loud and clear the disgust that we have for the way that's being dealt with by this criminal act perpetrated by one of their own. In yesterday's report, I told you how Southend Borough Council have told residents close to a drive-through McDonald that they're not allowed to park outside their own homes in order to allow the franchise to reopen and make a bit of cash. It was said by Ron Woodley, Southend Council Cabinet Member for Transport, that we were asked to work closely with Essex Police to ensure a temporary and safe traffic management system is in place. And that's important, as I would assume that traffic management is a key factor, or at least the key reason being pushed by councils for helping the franchises rather than being on the side of the residents. Well, let's just see how well that working with the franchises is going, shall we? Now, this is not from Southend, by the way, but from a McDonald's in Wolverhampton, which, like the Southend McDonald's and no doubt every other, is deeply concerned about traffic management in the area and ensuring that people are safe on the roads during their reopening. Isn't it great to see that emergency ambulances can't get through because of the selfishness of people intent on getting themselves a fucking Big Mac? Great bit of traffic management, and I can see why working with the police and councils has had a positive impact on the reopening of the franchises, albeit at a complete detriment to other road users. But you know, as long as the councillors get their backhander and the franchises can make a bit of money, who cares about local residents? I hope the people who are blocking the roads with absolutely no thought for anyone but themselves choke on their chicken nuggets and the ambulance struggles to get to you. You've gone months without Mackies, fending for yourselves, but literally as soon as they reopen you simply stop thinking about other people and worry only about your McDonald's fix. I think it's disgusting, to be honest, in my own personal opinion, and people should be ashamed. Over the past couple of weeks, I've spoken about the Anthony Granger and Stephen Hayward investigations. On the 3rd of June, I told you how Stephen Hayward managed to get his misconduct hearing thrown out, leaving him untouched for his part in the death of Anthony Granger, and the fact that he lied in court, which is of course perjury. Perjury being a statement made under oath which the witness knows to be false and untrue, which is made with the intent to mislead. A person convicted under perjury, or perverting a course of justice as is otherwise known, can on indictment receive a maximum penalty of 7 years in prison, a fine, or both. But yet again, police privilege prevails. Now, I came across a video earlier which was uploaded by Gal Granger, Anthony's girlfriend, who has been fighting for justice since his unlawful death by pursuing qualifications in law at Salford University. I'm not going to break down this video. I'm going to let her tell you in her own words some information regarding the investigation, as she puts it so well, and I think she deserves her voice to be heard.
I just thought it would be right to clear up a little bit of confusion which I think has been caused through the Hayward trial and Anthony's trial, mainly through what happened at the gross misconduct hearing, but also from things that are released in the press and things like that. So lots of people have asked me, is that it now? Is the Anthony Granger trial inquiry and investigation over? Because Hayward didn't get found to be guilty of gross misconduct, and that's completely not the case. They're two totally separate issues. Anthony Granger's inquiry is against Anthony Granger being shot and killed, and the police covering up, lying, destroying evidence and fabricating evidence, everything which actually led to Anthony being killed. Now the Hayward inquiry, or the Hayward misconduct, is because when Hayward was the assistant chief constable and he gave evidence in the Anthony Granger inquiry, he triggered a subcategory, I suppose you could call it. So the problem with Hayward was he lied whilst he was sworn on oath in front of a judge in a court of law. He broke the law. So this gross misconduct hearing is Anthony Granger's trial, and this is Hayward's. It's kind of a spin-off, and the reason I was fighting that one so hard was not, well, it is for Anthony, you know, this is all on behalf of Anthony, but it was on behalf of a change in the law for the public and for other people, and just to get rid of the corruption and the lies that the police are actually allowed to get away with. Now Hayward lied in the court and admitted he lied, which is law. Law, if you break it, should be punished by law, if that makes sense. But unfortunately, he then retired from a job, and the gross misconduct hearing is in effect a employment tribunal for an action that he did whilst he was employed by the institution, Greater Manchester Police. Then he retired from Greater Manchester Police, and for some reason, when a police officer breaks the law, they are dealt with in work. Now I am fighting that, and this is it's not completely, but it's a different case to the original one that we're fighting for Anthony. This is about police. Come. I've come to the car to get a little bit of peace and quiet. I'm fighting the fact that police officers can lie and not face legal consequences like I would and like you would. Now he's retired and he's a civilian. If he's retired and a civilian, he shouldn't be afforded the rights that a police officer gets, and the police should not be getting these rights. They should not be allowed to lie and be dealt with in effect, an employment tribunal by his boss, ex-boss. Bearing in mind, his boss is the Chief Constable of Police. He was the Assistant Chief Constable of Police, second in command, and he lied, and he was dealt with by his friend and his colleague at the Greater Manchester Police, which is a job where he doesn't work anymore. So it's like me going breaking the law right now and then school ringing me for detention. I'm 37. School ain't going to punish me anymore. Oh, God, I hope not. Terrifies me. So I cannot be done with through a disciplinary at school or one of my old jobs. I will be dealt with by the law, and that is what is so paramount and so important to this gross misconduct hearing. So I hope that's cleared things up a little bit. The Anthony Granger inquiry is still very much in play. We still have Greater Manchester Police, which is under investigation, so I don't know how they was able to even be afforded to discipline another Greater Manchester Police officer, but that's a separate issue. Then we've got the ones in control and command. Then I've got to sort out why the CPS decided to go against all the recommendations that the IOPC and the judge and everybody else has recommended for these outcomes. So Anthony Granger's trial is very much still going. One of the reasons Haywood's trial collapsed is because his legal team and Greater Manchester's legal team actually said an 18-month delay is, I think the word they used was unconscionable, that anybody should have to face the trial after 18 months of delay. Bearing in mind I was sitting there 8 years down the line, still going through delay after delay after delay. But that's fine. We're just a family. We're not police officers. We're just the public that they are meant to protect and serve. We don't count. Don't worry about that. Then second of all, he complained that, you know, it was an unfair that GMP had the full resources of the full resources at their disposal, which meant that they could have 25 QCs if they wanted to. They can have 100 investigators, whereas Haywood only had one full legal team. What a poor... Get his violin out. We aren't entitled to legal aid to carry on with our proceedings. But yet he's only complaining because... And then he goes on about the redactions. I'm not being funny, but the GMP and the NCA and all them lot, they're the ones who redacted it. And the legal team actually said to the chair, the legally qualified chair that was sitting on the gross misconduct panel, we can't go ahead with this hearing because you are not qualified enough to read underneath these redactions, so how on earth can we lift them? Well, if that's the case, on a gross misconduct hearing, do not pick a legally qualified chair that isn't entitled or have a high enough clearance level to read underneath the redactions. A redaction, by the way, is a piece of paper and the bit that is a bit secret, they black it out. That's all it is. But she wasn't able to lift those redactions because it was too secret. We are never ever going to be able to get rid of this culture of police brutality and police corruption if we allow these things to happen. So yes, I am still fighting Anthony's case, but yes, along the way, as tiring and as painstaking and as draining as it is, I'm still trying to fight for the rights for everybody else, including myself, including my children that have got to grow up in this future, to stop the police from being allowed to lie or commit a crime and not be dealt with by the law. So I hope that's cleared a few things up for you, because I know a lot of people have asked me, oh, you tried hard. Thank you. I really do appreciate every single kind comment. And I just want to say thank you so much for all your support against the police corruption that led to Anthony Granger being illegally and unlawfully killed by Greater Manchester Police.
Now, as many of you will know, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, was arrested on the 1st of March at Centre Parks in Woburn for assault after he allegedly punched a man who his daughter had said had touched her inappropriately. At the time, the mainstream media, as you would expect, hid the fact that there was any allegation of sexual assault against his daughter and focused entirely on the fact that Bedfordshire Police arrested him for assault on the male, who some outlets described as a holiday maker. Even the police at the time made a statement making no effort to let people know that this came about as a result of sexual assault claims against Tommy's daughter, saying only that the one man sustained an injury to his face and received first aid at the scene. Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, 37, of Bedford, has been charged with common assault. Well, it now appears that the man who sexually assaulted his daughter has been charged based on advice from the CPS. Crown Prosecution Services are the ones who are supposed to look at the evidence the police have gathered and make a decision as to whether someone can be charged and what they should be charged with, based on the quality of evidence garnered by the police. Now, although I don't trust the Crown Prosecution Service, as they can and do often fail to proceed many cases to court, in this case they clearly think there is enough evidence in order for the charges to stick against the man who made the assault. I said it in my video when this happened, regardless to your personal feelings towards Stephen, aka Tommy Robinson, this case is not about politics or your views on him as a person. It should simply be about the fact that a grown man sexually assaulted a young girl, and if that's not enough for you to put your feelings aside, if that's not enough for you to forget who he is and concentrate on what is important about this case, then I would be concerned that your hatred towards someone means that you don't care about a child being molested in a family holiday resort, and that is incredibly disturbing. A crime against a child should be seen as serious regardless to who the parents are. In fact, the parents shouldn't even come into the equation, and personally I'm glad that this is going forward with a charge. Not because of my like or dislike for Tommy, but simply because this is about a child. And if it was my child, I would certainly want the case investigated properly and impartially, regardless to what the police thought of me. On the 20th of May in PAP Reports, I spoke about Wendell Baker, a man convicted of beating and raping a pensioner who was sentenced to life but ordered to spend at least 10.5 years in prison. But following a second trial allowed under double jeopardy laws, his minimum term was later reduced by 2 years. Now that 2-year reduction meant that he was now cleared for release from prison by the Parole Board. 63-year-old Baker from Walthamstow beat and raped pensioner Hazel Backwell in 1997 at home in Stratford before locking her in a cupboard and leaving her there. She was only found by chance the following evening by a neighbour. The attack left her too afraid to continue living alone or go out by herself, and she sadly died in 2002. Well, Baker has had his parole hearing and has been granted release, but it seems to have been done in relative secrecy. Although we knew the release could have happened, it was only after the release of the rapist that the family were told. The Ministry of Justice has apologised to Mr Backwell, Hazel's son, for failing to contact him and has asked the Parole Board to reconsider the decision to free Baker, claiming it was irrational and not in line with the evidence. The panel is said to have taken evidence from a probation officer, a forensic psychologist and Baker himself, as well as considering information in a dossier about his case. Parole Board guidelines have stated the victim of a crime or relatives of the victim has died should be entitled to Well, that was exciting. My apologies. Okay. Parole Board guidelines have stated the victim of a crime or relatives, if the victim has died, should be entitled to submit a statement for a parole hearing, setting out how their family has been affected. But Mr Backwell was never contacted until a journalist rang him after the board had announced its decision that Baker was suitable for release. Government sources said in 2013 that police had failed to pass on Mr Backwell's contact details to the National Probation Service, which is responsible for keeping victims updated. And although efforts were made to trace him before the parole hearing, they were not successful. A Ministry of Justice spokesman said Mr Backwell's family should not have found out in this way and that the victim's code would be updated. I would ask why the Ministry of Justice has to ask the Parole Board to reconsider, considering the MOJ must be a higher and more powerful organisation than that of the Parole Board. If they feel there was a mistake, then surely they should simply take the case back to court rather than asking for the reconsideration. Organisations such as the Parole Board and others simply fail all too often to follow protocol and do the things they should in what I would suggest is simply them believing that they are above reproach without oversight. And this is one of the huge problems that we see in society today, with organisations believing they can get away with just about anything, as they are no longer accountable by the people they serve. Cressida Dick is basically allowing people to break the law over what I would call fears of being called out as a racist. With demonstrations and protests taking place across the country, with thousands of people ignoring lockdown rules on how many people can gather. Yes, I know I said rules when I'm talking about laws, but I haven't quite finished yet. Cressida Dick said that with feelings running high over the death of George Floyd and because of the effects of the coronavirus lockdown, police feared serious and violent disorder if they stepped in to enforce lockdown rules. Speaking to the London Assembly, Dick said people should put themselves in the shoes of a public order commander faced with a near spontaneous demonstration with no chance to negotiate with organisers and a large crowd who would not listen. Then you have to make some judgments at the time, in the moment, about what is the best thing to do, she said. And judgments have been made. The people are out in such numbers, feeling so strongly, and are refusing to disperse when asked, that the officers have formed the view that if they were to try at that stage with those sorts of numbers to enforce en masse, we probably would have ended up with a very serious disorder and a bad situation, a difficult situation, a challenging situation for everybody, turning into a violent situation. So these are the sorts of risks the public order commanders have to assess. Haven't I told you that numbers matter? Now, although everyone is in support of the protests, and I certainly back anyone who wants to protest and have a responsibility ourselves to remain within the law, lockdown rules are not law, but criminal damage and violent disorder are covered under law and should be dealt with no matter who's committing the offence. We've already seen in the USA how the police are now reacting to violent disorder and criminal damage with force. These protests are about the use of unnecessary force, but giving the police a reason to use force is not going to help anyone. Disruption is key at protests. Being heard is key to a protest. But who's going to listen to people who are causing damage or injury to others? Martin Hewitt, chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, Mike Cunningham, chief executive of the College of Policing, and Paul Griffiths, president of the Police Superintendents Association, said in a statement that we stand alongside all those across the globe who are appalled and horrified by the way George Floyd lost his life. Justice and accountability should follow. We are also appalled to see the violence and damage that has happened in so many US cities. Since then, our hearts go out to all those affected by these terrible events and hope that peace and order will soon be restored, while yet allowing people here in the UK to destroy or damage property, including war memorials in London, which saw soldiers from nearby barracks come out in their civvies to scrub the monuments clean amid abuse by protesters.
Couldn't even wait a day, not one day, because of their precious memorial.
Excuse me, when I saw you earlier, you picked up a sign. You all picked up signs and put them in bin bags.
Oh!
Why did you put them up? I don't understand.
So, spray painting. Hang on, I'm gonna get their faces in. Everybody say cheese.
Which I have to say, I personally think is pretty disgusting, seeing as the protesters damaged the monuments, breaking the law and being allowed to get away with it. I want the voices of those protesting to be heard, but I also want and advocate for equal punishment across the board, for everyone, no matter their job or background. And for the police to allow this to happen over fears of being called racist is wrong. And for the public protesters to think that they can get away with damage or injury to people whilst protesting against injury to people is completely hypocritical and is going to do nothing more than cause more problems. Please think about what you're trying to achieve here. Please think hard about what you are fighting against. In effect, what you are doing yourself. Being arrested or injured for damage or injury to others whilst fighting against injustice is hypocritical and is only going to see the police eventually, after they can't hide from it anymore, become more forceful against you, and they will have the law on their side at that point, which negates your initial intentions. With yet another disgusting example of how the police believe the them and us narrative, it seems the police now think they are absolved from following the same rules as the public. Police forces across the UK are apparently creating their own test and trace scheme, which would see the police exempt from the same restrictions as us if they're found to be infected. Under the plans, police who test positive for COVID-19 would not give their contacts information to NHS contact tracers, but would instead inform their police force, who would take over contact tracing to identify anyone at risk of catching a virus, proving that they have far more time on their hands than they let on to the public. Another option being discussed is seconding staff from NHS test and trace to police forces, although police chiefs think that Public Health England doesn't have the resources to make this possible. And I'm surprised the police forces have the resources to make this happen when there is plenty of crime still to be investigated. Besides, what gives the police the idea that they are medically trained enough to make these decisions anyway? Police are suggesting that the reason for their own tracing system is to protect sensitive information, and that they're concerned that entire stations or units may have to be shut for isolation purposes. So basically, even the police don't trust Public Health England to hold on to data, but we're expected to allow them to hold on to ours. Not only ours, but being expected to cough up personal information of friends and family members, which we don't even have the right to do. A source said there's a host of areas we have to be very careful, naming undercover operations, counter-terrorism, confidential source handling, and high-profile victims and offenders are areas of concern. The source added, if I'm working undercover with another officer, giving those details across could give away not just their information, but the methodology of how we work, which would put people in danger. How? So you came into contact with someone. How the hell are people going to put two and two together and come up with the fact that you may be undercover or you've been dealing with an informant? What utter bollocks and a pathetic excuse that unfortunately many sheeple will simply accept without even bothering to think about. I've heard nothing about the system asking for details on why you were with a person or what you were doing at the time, only that you were within a specified distance to another person for a set period of time. So why are the police really trying to get out of following the same rules as the rest of us? Alison Pollock, director of Newcastle University Institute of Health and Society, said contact tracing systems are based on trust. This tells you that the police don't trust the system and don't believe data will not be shared more widely, not just with the call handlers, but the whole system. I think the public needs to be asking very serious questions about this. Well, we already are asking serious questions about it. In fact, there's a lot of us extremely concerned about the whole thing. But with the police now also of the opinion that the government can't be trusted, simply enforces our own beliefs. 17-year-old Crohn's disease sufferer Bradley Seddon was stopped by Cheshire police interceptors who seized his electric scooter. The scooter, although I've yet been able to find an image of, appears to be of a two-wheeled scooter like this one. Bradley's father said, "He's just been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I brought him one of these scooters you can buy from Halfords, 500 quid, and he's had it about 2 weeks or something like that. I bought all the accessories online and he got pulled over yesterday near Macefield Avenue. They've basically just took it. I've been down Widnes police station this afternoon." He added, "Nearly everywhere you go you see a kid on one of these scooters. All the copper said was if he was 18 I'd give him 6 penalty points and a fine. He said there was no law and legislation about this, it's a grey area. It was outside my house, a marked police interceptor for a kid on a scooter. You know what I mean? It's a bit ridiculous." Bradley said, "It's just annoying me because I'm confined back to the house. I've had it about 2 weeks. You see everyone else riding around on them, and they only took mine. Mr. said and added, you see things about stolen motorbikes and crap. There's no mention of picking on disabled kids. A statement from Widnes local policing unit said the law is clear with regards to scooter use. And you wonder why you're hated so much. As if I hadn't proved the point already with that last story, a woman was stopped by the Met Police in Regent Street, London on Wednesday and accused of breaching the Public Order Act for bearing a slogan likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress on her t-shirt. What was that slogan, you may well be asking? Well, it simply said, "Fuck Boris." And in a video which was taken, it clearly shows the utter snowflakery and brainwashing of our wonderful boys and girls in blue, who literally have nothing better to do than pick on people making a political or personal statement.
Reasonable. You think it's illegal for me to have this t-shirt on? Based on what law?
Section 5 of the Public Order Act, it's an offence to wear signs, visual representation that's likely to cause harassment.
Why would that cause harassment? To who?
To other people.
But who?
Well, people will find that offensive.
You do, obviously. I don't, and most people agree.
No, but the fact
But
is...
that's not inciting, go and do something to Boris, is it? So, like, what...
It's going to cause some people, likely...
But so they might...
Snowflake, snowflake, Lilo, snowflake, Lilo, snowflake, falling from the sky.
But you haven't shown me the law.
Are you refusing regardless?
I'm asking you to show me the law.
A person who's guilty of the offence if he uses threatening or abusive words of behaviour and display or disorderly behaviour or displays any writings and signs other than visible or other visible representations which have threatening or abusive
What's
within the
threatening?
hearing and sight of a person likely to cause harassment, alarm, distress.
That's quite a broad one, isn't it?
Quite broad.
No, it's quite clear. Visible signs of
But
representation.
what word on here is bad?
What, so you think that word's not offensive to people?
If it's not causing serious offence or causing someone to cause harm,
but
is
that's
it?
the thing, it is, and there's case law
That's
to prove
your
that.
opinion.
No, there's case law.
Now, if it said you're a cunt and I'm going to stab you, then, you know, there could be an argument that it could cause someone alarm or distress. However, as Jessie-Lu Flynn quite rightly counters, I find your uniform upsetting. Unfortunately, Jessie-Lu Flynn folded and agreed to zip up her top to hide the slogan on her t-shirt. Since the incident has been shared on social media, some lawyers have come out in defence of a statement and her right to make it. One lawyer said someone would typically need to complain for police to respond to a public order offence, and that case law suggests coppers are not expected to get offended themselves. Now, that's not entirely true. It just means that they're expected to have a far higher threshold for being offended, as they're faced with offensive words themselves most days in the course of their duties. Even TV judge Rob Rinder got in on the debate, saying this officer believed that a person's right to exercise her freedom of speech was a crime. He was wrong. Whatever your politics, we should all be troubled by this. How differently this could have ended. Ms. Flynn said it's not like anyone said to the police, "I'm offended, please get that woman to cover it up." Protesters during the march were saying "fuck Boris" and "fuck the police." My heart was really racing. I was thinking I could actually get arrested because of what I was wearing. And you should have. If you're going to make a statement, at least stand by it. Obviously, it's a bit contentious. There's going to be people that support Boris. I genuinely didn't know if that was against the law. That's going to be up to the individual police officer. My opinion is, until Boris stops fucking the country, I'm not going to stop telling him to fuck himself. Spokesperson for British Transport Police said, "We are aware of a video on social media of one of our officers near Oxford Circus Underground Station. Our officer approached the individual in a courteous and professional manner and legitimately challenged them for wearing an item of clothing that contains an obscene word that could cause alarm or distress." Utterly contemptuous behaviour and attitude from the boys in blue, adding more weight to the fact that they are simply not fit for purpose. Now, I know there was a repeal Section 5 campaign back in 2013 headed by many comedians who managed to get the word insulted removed from the Act. I wonder how many of you would sign a petition to have likely to be caused harassment, alarm or distress removed from the Act, seeing as someone being likely to commit a crime still isn't a crime until the fucking crime's been committed, making you guilty of an offence that's not actually an offence at all and is still being abused by the police daily. Now, if I was to set something up, would you be willing to sign and spread the word in order to have a non-existent crime that's been criminalised and abused removed from legislation? Let me know in the comments. Very big thank you to all the supporters of the channel, including the Patreon supporters. Your support is truly appreciated. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.